So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for Trace Indy. So coffee conversation today is with Charla Yearwood. And I'm a little nervous only because I've actually never met her. We've never had a conversation before for like the past 5 minutes before I started recording this for all of you. So we met on Twitter. She has real good things to say. And I just really like following her. And so I wanted to share her with all of you. And so Charla is a therapist and owner of Connect Community. Did I say that right? Perfect.
Yep, Connected in Community.
Perfect. And she is a mental health therapist and she's an adjunct professor and does so many things for the community. So Charla, thanks so much for having coffee with a stranger.
Thank you. I'm excited.
Well, so tell the audience, tell the viewers, tell the listeners, what do you do in your words? What do you do?
So what I do is I provide space for people to be vulnerable, to show up as their full self, and usually healing comes along with that. But that's really how I see my work, is creating space for people to show up as their full authentic self, and to celebrate that.
Oh my God, this is why I wanted to have a conversation with you. So because I want to pull on that mental health thread, especially for the year that we've had.
Yeah.
How did you what made you say, I want to be a mental health provider?
So I did it. That is not how I came to any of this. So first I went to school, like, I want to be a teacher. I want to teach. And then I was in the classroom and I was like, how can kids learn when they're hungry? And all these other things were going on. So then like all of my social justice warrior stuff went off and I went into social work. Like, I'm going to tear down all the systems of oppression and make sure people have their needs met so they can like operate in the world. Like, that's really where I'm passionate.
Yeah.
Like, let's break down the barriers and let's do that work. And then along the way, I've come to know, and like what I can kind of stand on and say is the truth that I believe in, is that healing comes for all of us and oppression will cease to exist when we are all connected in community, truly connected, seeing each other as our full vulnerable selves, making space for our own vulnerability, making space for other people's vulnerability, and really building true connections with one another. And so I saw that the systems of oppression would be broken down with that, but that a lot of that work was really interpersonal, individual work that had to come from being like the reasons we're often not able to show up for other people and make space for their vulnerabilities because we're not comfortable with our own. And that led me to understanding all of this mental health stuff and the therapy stuff. And so that's how I got to this work of doing therapy. I guess that's a formal way it's called, but really it's just building connection.
Yeah.
And healing, and the healing that comes with being able to exist in the world as your full self and not feel shame attached to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that, especially as women, shame is kind of a death spiral of, whether it's something super, super simple, but then it's also, what we had kind of talked offline about, also like failure. And then you shame spiral, like women.
Yes.
We are very, very layered, very, very layered.
I just want people to be the sum like of their full self, and for there to be space for people to be both failure and that to be celebrated. Like, yes, you fail, you tried,
thank you,
great job. And I just want like space to like celebrate that and make space for that. Yeah, and especially for women, absolutely.
So where have you found, and again, I always tee this up, the struggle question, and I don't know if it would be just this year for you, and I'm curious what you would see. I'm going to put on my headphones real fast just to.
You're fine.
So I'm super curious to see what you would say, where you've seen some of that struggle.
With COVID and lockdown, I am seeing a lot of people, struggling with being away and not feeling that they can have connection and community in this time. Like we met online, I'm a big supporter of online community. I'm a part of one of those infamous mom groups on the web. And I know,
danger, living on the edge.
Yeah, but I've been connected with some of these women for over 5 years when I was pregnant with my daughter. And we've met and we've gone on retreats together and we're from all over. And so I have true relationship and community with folks who I probably wouldn't have connection with
Yeah.
otherwise. And what we share in common is we all had babies in May 2014. So we have community
Yeah.
in that. So yeah, that's I'm a big proponent for online community, building, looking for spaces to connect with other people. It doesn't just have to be physical.
Yeah.
But even just connecting to ourselves, like music, art, all of that is ways that we can build connection and relationship. And I don't want to downplay the struggle of not being able to touch and connect and see
Right.
people face to face, but there are other ways for us to have connection.
Yeah.
And I just try to highlight those and lean into them.
I love that. So, I mean, that's almost kind of a bit of a delight, right? The fact that we now all lean into that social,
Uh-huh.
that social community. So, what would you give as if the community were to show up? And I kind of want to pull on a
Mhm.
thread of community a bit on diving a little bit more into mental health.
Mhm.
How can how can any community, my community, your community, online community, all of that,
Yeah.
how can people kind of, show up, whether it's for themselves or for the community as
So I think the key to that is creating space and allowing space for vulnerability and for people to show up as their full self.
yeah,
A lot of times with community, we have an idea of who people are supposed to be. When I teach a class at University of Mississippi on community. And in the first session, one of the questions I asked them was, who's a part of your community? Who's not a part of your community? Why aren't they a part of your community? What are the rules of your community? And what happens when people violate the rules of your community? But that is to say that like we have rules set in our community and many of them safety rules, and those are can be healthy boundaries that we set, but are we leaving space for someone to deal with the pain of a death in the family? How are we as a community making space right now for all the loss that many folks are dealing with?
yeah,
um, is there space for collective grief, um, as a nation, as a city, just within your friend circle? How are we making space for people and celebrating people's grief and just saying to them, you can show up in this meeting, you
yeah,
can show up in this interaction and bring your grief. It doesn't have to sit on a shelf at home that you're just going to deal with on your own. We want to help share the load of your grief. Um, Even if it's just grief of you planned a really special 40th birthday party and you
yeah,
didn't get to have it this year. Like
yeah,
I we as a community have to allow space for people to show up with their grief, with their pain, with their quote quote negative emotions.
hmm,
I am not a fan of positive vibes only. Um, that whole like movement, like I want your quote quote negativity. I
yeah.
want your pain.
Well, I think of that in the sense, and I was just kind of internalizing a bit what you said, and it's true. I want people to show up. I think my problem lies is I am not equipped with the tools to
Mhm,
hold that space in a way. Like
mhm,
I'm good
mhm,
to a point. I just don't have the tools in my chest. Like I'm good to a point of like
mhm.
feel better and what can I do? But I also don't want to give like cliche things. And then
Yes,
to a point where I'm like, pull yourself up. Do you know what I mean?
yes,
And I don't want,
yes,
and I don't mean to, but I am not taught that. And that is a
mhm,
very hard,
yes,
just like how long do you hold that for people? And then who gets to say I'm the one who decides how long I hold that?
mhm,
So
mhm,
it's really interesting, because I think you're right. I think people want to show up. I think people want to show
mhm.
up
Yes,
vulnerable. And I think that they
yes,
want to bring their whole self. I think what the fear comes is you don't know how to deal with me in a negative way. Like, because then I'm too
yes,
much, or then I'm too this, or then
yes,
those things.
yes. And that's big with women. It's
Yeah.
big with women of like, I'm too much. I'm going to, if I express myself, that it's going to overwhelm other people. And so then you're contorting your own emotional expression
Yes.
for other people's needs, and so your own needs aren't being met. And so that's why when I work with my clients, it's about making space for your own show up, for your own pain. Like acknowledge that you grieve and then build empathy with the
Yeah.
person who grieves, and you can sit there in it because you are also grieving.
Yes.
So their pain becomes an expression of your pain, and you can be in that together. And so then you don't use so many cliches because you are also in pain. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? I feel like that's really
100%.
convoluted, but
No, I love that. And then I also think, and that is very different, obviously, during racial lines, like how,
hmm
as a Black woman versus a white woman,
yeah.
how we deal with those things and how we interact with each other on
hmm
those different experiences is
Oh, well,
incredibly.
you're speaking into my language, and so like that's where we need. When we talk about that, like that's where we need white people to challenge white supremacy from
Yeah.
a place of how it hurts them, not
Yeah.
just understanding how it hurts and harms Black folks, but how it hurts and harms and limits white folks from existing. My husband is white, and his
Mhm.
grandmother is comes from an immigrant family. They no longer have a language. They no longer have the culture. And that's
Yeah.
a consequence of white supremacy, which says
Yeah.
that you have to assimilate to what exists here. And so fight white supremacy because you don't have a connection with your own heritage because
100%.
the language of this country is limiting your access to it. Like, make it also personal. Don't just
Yeah.
do it as a benevolence to me. Do it because you believe it, because it's hurting and harming you. And so, really understanding, like, patriarchy hurts men. And I appreciate the solidarity of wanting to fight for me, but I want you to fight for you.
Yeah.
Um, my work is selfish. I need other people to come to healing for themselves so that I can show up as myself
Yeah.
when I'm around them. So that they can give me what I need, so my
Yeah.
needs can be met. So all of this is like I want to help other people heal so that I can help my own healing, and then it's all connected
Oh, it's so
into
good. It's so good. I hate that we only have like limited time because I feel like we might one day have to do a podcast. I don't even know. Um, okay, so that was so big. So how are you? I mean, obviously the kind of that final legacy question that makes everyone go, "Ee." um,
yeah.
how are you? And I think this could go, deeper or however you want to handle,
Mhm.
how are you leaving that trace? How are you leaving your mark?
I hope that the trace that I leave is that I hold space for other people, that I can see someone at their deepest, darkest, sharing their most intimate bits that they think are too much for someone,
Yeah.
that they think that they should be ashamed and embarrassed and run away from. I mean, some people have done real harm and wrongdoing in the world, and grappling with it. I hope that my trace is that she cared and she showed up for me even in my ugly part. Um, I just really hope that my intention in my life and my goal, I really hope that I'm able to hold space for people's quote ugly parts. Um, and that I
Just
help,
be a t-shirt for you. I hope
yeah,
your ugly parts.
yeah, I might steal that from you.
I love
But yeah,
that.
I want to hold space for everyone's ugly parts.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I want. That's what I want my trace and legacy to be is that, because I have ugly parts, because I'm messed up and I don't want to be ashamed of those. And
Mhm.
so in order to eliminate the shame that comes from them and to learn from them and to grow from them, I also have to do that for other people. Because every time I'm seeing someone and judging them of like, oh, they did such and such, I am holding onto that shame from against myself for the wrongdoings that I've done. So it's a big push for me to see people who I like, people who are like Ku Klux Klan white supremacists, for me to
Yeah.
try to have it's a spiritual practice for me to really try to hold space for empathy
Yeah.
for everyone.
It I think that's such a big reminder that there's so many people and the push for therapy, and I'm a big proponent of therapy, um, is so big for oneself, obviously. Like so
Hmm hmm
as as someone who, going to therapy.
Yeah.
But I think that we hold therapists at time to this standard that they also are not having
Oh,
issue.
girl, I got issues.
But you know what I mean? Like I think that is something that I think that should be mindful that even though we're, talking into, and I'm sure, I mean, I cannot imagine.
Every Friday, I talk to every week. Every Friday, I talk to my own therapist and have
Yes.
my own. Like I got to work through my own stuff, right? Because I can only go. I think of it like as being a travel guide in this
Yes.
wilderness. I can only guide you down the paths that I've already gone myself. So I have to like lay bare all my
Yes.
things and get real with them so that I can help somebody else when they get to that place. It's like, you know what? There is life on the other side of this shame.
Yeah.
And then that is a daily work. And so I hope I hope that the work that I do
Yeah.
isn't just for my own healing. I am learning to prioritize making that about my children's healing. And you know, I have had in the past an intention to try to save the world and not necessarily, you know, pour that into my home also. Um,
We all do that.
Not that I wasn't, but like I just was like out saving the world and forgetting about like I have little people at home. I can,
Yeah.
you know, be a support too. So I am learning to, you know, prioritize
Yeah.
how I pour into them and seeing that as work
Yeah.
because there was a devaluing, and I recognize that that's part of a way bigger system. But there was a devaluing for me of that type of work
Oh,
because it wasn't doing something for like the world.
wasn't great. Yeah.
So I'm learning to put more value in how I speak to my children, how I interact with them, and that is world changing work because they will then go out and live in the world and exist in the world with you know with as a more healthy person. So
Yeah.
mhm, all of those things.
I just love it. I
So
want you to
much.
just keep rolling. But I also think that now that will always be I will only go to a therapist that is also going to a therapist. Like I think
Oh
that
yeah,
only
yeah. You
thing.
should totally ask them in
Yeah.
like the first consultation call, like if you're thinking about using them, do you receive therapy?
Oh, I think it's brilliant. That's a trace right there
Yeah.
too. Um, Charlotte, thanks so much. That was a very
Thank
short
you.
conversation, and we could have done that for like an hour, but I just thank you for the work that you do and the space that you hold for community and for women and for your kids and for inside the home. And just grateful for your time this morning.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate just being here.